What is a disturbing fact you wish you never knew? Story 1. Tarantula hawks are giant flying wasps that sting tarantulas, inducing paralysis. They then drag the paralyzed tarantula back to their nest and lay eggs in them. The eggs hatch, and the larvae slowly devour the still alive, paralyzed tarantula from the inside. Story 2. A guy I used to work with had either a condition or got a virus. I don't remember which, this was about 20 years ago, that attacked his spine. He went to bed fine and woke up the next day totally paralyzed from the waist down. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. There was no slow progression, just walking fine one day and completely unable to walk the next. Edit. I just looked up his obituary. He passed in 2011. He apparently had transverse myelitis that led him to become paralyzed. Story 3. I remember watching an episode of the show Monsters Inside Me, where this 16-year-old kid was doing something outside, and a fly flew into his eye. It only made contact for about a microsecond, but it was enough time for it to lay eggs. After they hatched, they started eating his eye from the inside, and he was starting to go blind until a doctor finally figured out what was wrong. Just imagine that. Getting your eye eaten from the inside and losing your sight all because a fly very briefly made contact with you. Ever since I learned about this, I get really paranoid when there's a fly around my face because of the fact that this could possibly happen to me. Story 4. Hospital-acquired delirium is insanely common in hospitalized elderly patients. Ever been woken up in the middle of the night by a hospitalized loved one thinking they're at home, in a hotel, in a different hospital, rambling about that makes zero sense, and perhaps thinking it's even a different year? I am there every night, and I'm starting to lose my mind. But do you know what's hilarious? My grandma at 96 handled 2 weeks in the hospital with no issue, whereas my 68-year-old father literally acts like a patient with dementia. Maybe he's developing dementia. I don't know. Again, I'm losing my mind too. Story 5. That your organs know where they're supposed to be and move on their own. During surgery, doctors will just stuff them back in, and they'll rearrange themselves back to their proper spot. Also, the one about your main body's immune system not knowing your eyes are a thing, and if it learned about them, they would be considered foreign objects and be destroyed. Me up pretty bad because I've always had eye problems since I was a kid. Sitting here going, is today the day I go blind? Story 6. We are possibly on the brink of medical technology and treatments losing 100 years of progress because new strains of bacteria are becoming antibiotic resistant. And finding new antibiotics is a slow process far out past the amount of resistant bacteria. Imagine getting a minor cut on your hand and dying from it. Added benefit, our own immune systems have also taken a hit as well because our overuse of antibiotics has killed a lot of the good bacteria in our bodies that work with our immune system. Story 7. That time really does go by faster as you age. When you're younger, comparatively, a year does not feel as long as the previous years because you've been alive for a short time. But when you're older, years seem shorter, comparatively, because you've been alive a lot longer. Hopefully I've said that in a way that makes sense. It is said that this is because when you were young, you learn and experience new stuff all the time. When you get older, each day is much like the one before, so your brain doesn't bother recording much about it. Story 8. Your own immune system can blind you. Basically, your eyes, as well as a few other parts of your body, including the testes, weirdly enough, experience a phenomenon called immune privilege, whereby they can have foreign antigens introduced without your main immune system kicking in. In most healthy people, that's a great thing. Stops you from having major vision problems when you're sick. But throw in an autoimmune disease, and things can get ugly fast. In some cases, that immune privilege breaks down, and suddenly, your immune system freaks out and sends all it's got to the eyes, which can lead to vision loss or complete blindness. Story 9. There's something like 2% of American prairie left, and it's still shrinking. A couple weeks ago, Rockford Airport was just given permission to expand over Illinois' best and nearly last prairie. Native prairie species sequester carbon far more efficiently than trees and support more biodiversity, not to mention their ability to stop erosion. Not only are we destroying prairie for human expansion, but we also went too far with planting trees and fire suppression. So areas that should be prairie and savanna are just planted with trees because we just assume that the more trees, the better. Don't even get me started about people's wildflower gardens that help very few insects and animals as compared to actual native plants. Story 10. Because of the scarcity of food where they live, polar bears are the only bear species that hunt humans. They have a superior sense of smell. They have a coat that blends in with the snow, and they are very patient. They'll smell you first, then track you, spot you, and stalk you. Oftentimes, you're completely unaware it's there until it's too late. That's why the rhyme of bear safety ends with, "If it's white, say goodnight." Story 11. Every fact from the Junko Furuta case. Despite being on the internet all my life and profusely studying history, I've never heard of such a pure evil act as what happened to her on both the internet or in any historical record. Please don't search for it. You will regret it. You may think I can handle it, or it can't be that bad, but it is. It still affects me years later. From an internet veteran, just take the advice once and do not look it up. Story 12. How quickly officers in the Navy will turn a blind eye to crime on their watch, on their base, to their cadets, to civilians, to families, and how they and their staff will mutually keep each other in the dark. The best officers are kept in the dark on purpose. They know things happen, but will never know the duration, extent, frequency, and severity that crimes occur. It's important to keep the frontmen polished and ignorant so they can defend the institution with rank and leadership training. It's difficult to argue with a trained officer, even if they are wrong or uninformed. Story 13. I once watched a video about a woman who stayed in her boyfriend's bathroom for 2 whole years. But that wasn't the disturbing part. It was the fact that she sat on the toilet for so long that her skin formed around the toilet seat, making it a part of her and had to be surgically removed. Worst of all, her legs atrophied to the point she had to stay in a wheelchair. I hope I never have to live like that. Poor woman. Story 14. When I went to Vietnam last August to visit my fiancée, I realized that they eat dog meat over there. Her family gave me some one day near the end of my trip and didn't tell me what it was. They had been telling me that they would have me try it while I was there. I tried a small bite of it and didn't care too much for it. Had too gamey of a taste for me. After that, I started noticing certain street vendors who sold dog meat and had tinned and cooked dog meat on display. Even worse, the neighbors kept a mother dog and her pups in a metal kennel at all times. After trying the dog meat, I started wondering where they got it from. Story 15. One really creepy fact that not many people know is that there's a bizarre condition called Cotard syndrome, also known as walking corpse syndrome. This is when someone is convinced that they're actually dead or that they don't exist at all. It's incredibly rare and is usually linked to depression or other mental illnesses. Sometimes, people with the condition believe that their organs are missing or rotting away, and in really bad cases, they might stop taking care of themselves or refuse to eat because they think they're already dead. While there are treatments available, it can be hard to diagnose and manage, and can have a really serious impact on the person's life. Story 16. Unless humans invent some sort of instantaneous travel in spite of distance, humans are quite screwed in the long haul. The universe is way too impossibly large for us to get anywhere in a meaningful amount of time. The only reason I find it disturbing is for most of my life, and I suspect most others, I have been sold and believed the idea that we would explore the stars eventually. Story 17. Trauma can physically alter and rewire the pathways in your brain in the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex, effectively changing the way your brain works for the rest of your life. It's literally irreversible. No matter how much therapy you may go through or how mentally healed you may be, your brain will never ever be the same again. Just makes me really sad to think about. I suffered a lot of abuse as a kid, and it hurts to know I'll never be the same as I used to be, no matter how much better I feel. Story 18. There are things called rogue black holes that zip around the universe. Light cannot escape its gravitational pull. Thus, it can bounce around the universe at speeds up to half the speed of light. These RBHs can be the size of a fingernail or our sun. Their gravitational pull would distort time and space, and they would barely show any sign of them being there. One could hit our universe or planet any time, and it would suck up the entire planet in seconds. Or worse, it could suck up a big part of our planet and then zip somewhere else almost instantaneously. Suddenly, we would have a moon-sized hole in the planet, putting everything off balance, crumbling into the hole, and the Earth would lose its momentum orbiting our sun. Our loss of mass could mean many different things, but whoever remains alive would certainly see the doom of humanity and our planet unfold over the following days and weeks. Story 19. We are currently at the beginning of a sixth mass extinction event. There have been 5 previous events of this magnitude in Earth's 4.5 billion year history. Therefore, based on history, it's a fair assumption that human beings will potentially cease to exist in the coming millennia. We are merely renting our time on this planet. There is no planet B. Story 20. I have one I wish I'd never found, and I believe I saw it here on Reddit. I don't have a link, but apparently when you blink, your eyes actually disengage from your brain for that split second. And there's a slim probability that you can blink and end up blind from them not reconnecting. That, and the one where your eyes have a different immune system from the rest of you. So if your brain finds your eyes, your body can also blind you as it attacks them, thinking they're a foreign object. Story 21. I recently learned that with wisdom tooth removal surgery here in the US, you aren't given general anesthesia, but instead given twilight anesthesia, during which you are still conscious and responsive but can't form new memories. Makes sense, since the oral surgeon would need you to open your mouth and move your tongue, but still freaky. Story 22. Australia had a prime minister that went for a swim at a beach, and he just disappeared and was never found and never seen again. There's a saying now that if someone disappears or leaves at a dinner party, work, etc., then you say, they did the Harold Holt, if anyone asks where they went. And what did Australia do? They named a damn public swimming pool after the Prime Minister who was never seen again, presumed dead after going for a swim. Story 23. I found this out recently. You can develop an autoimmune disease, even without any obvious symptoms. The warnings you'll often get are results of a blood test. This is because an autoimmune disease can be mistaken for other illnesses that we're familiar with. I was recently diagnosed with a form of anemia and didn't know it. I knew I already had issues with my thyroid and at risk for diabetes due to family history. I wasn't aware my body was having a hard time taking in any nutrients my body needs, despite changes. I will have to undergo further tests to rule out if it's the worst, outside my periods. Story 24. Local anesthetic doesn't work on 5 to 15% of people. This can vary from a complete lack of numbing to burning through it exceptionally fast. This is despite ideal placement and increased dosages. If you're lucky, you'll get a doctor who believes you when you say you can still feel everything. It's also possible to overdose on local anesthetics. Story 25. Wound dehiscence. Sometimes, just because it can, after even stitches have been removed and the wound appears healed, a wound will just reopen. This can be to the full depth of the initial incision, or the layers of skin tearing apart, or the layers of skin tearing apart and separating from the muscle and fat below. And yes, it hurts like hell. I've just had mine resected and restitched, so I'm speaking from experience. Story 26. Despite the Mythbusters test with vessels of insufficient size, if a big enough ship sinks, it's basic physics that it will pull people and water down with it. The 2 survivors of HMS Hood were pulled down with the ship and were on the verge of drowning when a boiler, or perhaps magazine explosion, launched them to the surface. If you're deep enough, the water will force its way into your lungs due to the pressure differential. Also, I'm really curious how long the longest time a person has survived inside a sunken ship. Some ships sink shallowly enough that I'd guess someone has probably survived in a sealed compartment for at least 8 hours after sinking. Story 27. Mescaline makes time and space conform to your doubts. For example, I thought planes weren't real, so I went to the Air and Space Museum to prove to myself they were. And then I saw a plane come swooping down like it was about to land. But then I realized I'm not at an airport. And I turned around because I was on my bike and the plane had vanished. So then I booked it out of there to my dealer's house, stopped to eat some pupusa, then found the old trail to my house. Even after the Yu-Gi-Oh demons tried to make me go insane. Story 30. Your eyes and brain have a separate immune system from your body. The body only tolerates this via a system known as immunity privilege. If your body decides to randomly not recognize this privilege, it will work to reject them. Cockroaches may or may not be in your coffee grounds. And if they are, you can develop an allergy to coffee via your allergy to certain insects. Story 31. Certain canned beverages like Monster will grow layers of mold on the liquid inside if the box was even just slightly bent or damaged. It literally takes almost nothing to get these things growing mold. You can pop the can like normal. It can still be sealed, but if even the cap was slightly put on the wrong mold. Source. I worked at a repackaging center at a distribution factory for beer and energy drinks. I don't drink those things anymore, though I got them there for free. Story 32. There is a parasite that is mostly waterborne that will nest on your bones and feed off of your muscles and fat. They eventually grow from being microscopic to being about 12 feet long and all wrapped up around your bones. By the time most people who contract the parasite figure out they have it, it will have poked through the skin, leading you to have to pull it out slowly so as to not rip it in half. From what I know, it's extremely painful, but if you don't do this, you will die. I don't know the name of the parasite, and some of the stuff I said might be a bit wrong, but it's still disgusting and disturbing to me. Story 33. In high school, I took administration of justice, not by choice. I was sick when we were choosing our courses for the next school year, so the counselor selected my electives. I fell in love with the class. I now knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. Then I went on a ride-along. I don't want to get into any details because the details still disturb me 20 plus years later. All I can say is I hate people. So many horrible, unspeakable things happening every day. I know that if I were to have become a sheriff's deputy, I would have snapped and ended someone. Ignorance truly is bliss. God help us all. Story 34. There's a type of crayfish that farms sea stars by cutting all their water legs off and eating its arms all the way to the center, but leaving the center intact. It then feeds the sea star with kelp to keep it alive, so it regenerates, and then repeats the process. Story 35. So deep-sea anglerfish have a female much larger than the male. The light and huge teeth we see in various forms of media are female anglerfish. But the much smaller males don't have any of that. They attach themselves to the female with their mouth, and later their cells fuse, and their circulatory system combines with the male's and gets nutrients through the blood flow, and loses most if not all of its external organs while the female becomes like a self-fertilizing hermaphrodite. Story 36. When you stand over a high place and you just think about jumping, even though you're not going to jump, it's called the call of the void. Interesting, but disturbing. Story 37. Encephalitis lethargica causes you to slowly survive, but not live. After bouts of deep sleep, where patients can be woken very easily but fall immediately back into the deep sleep, they're left with post-encephalitis symptoms. The main one being that their minds are fully aware and conscious, but they can't physically function, a bit like locked-in syndrome. And they display extreme apathy. They even know they're displaying apathy but can't express any emotions, so they're completely stuck until someone throws a ball at them, which they then can immediately catch, or until someone holds their hand and walks alongside them. Then they can suddenly walk. Otherwise, nothing. So bizarre. Story 38. Organophosphates, including the chemical weapon sarin gas, work by inhibiting your muscles' ability to relax. Your muscles basically constrict and can't unconstrict, causing what feels like a muscle cramp through your entire body. Your arms, your chest, your eyes, your tongue, everything. It most frequently kills via asphyxiation because you can't exhale. Surviving means a permanent, irrevocable loss of motor function, even with rapid medical treatment. Story 39. The first face transplant was for an 8-year-old girl named Sandeep Kaur, who got her entire face ripped off by getting her hair caught in a thresher in 1994. The parents came in with her face in 2 pieces in a plastic bag. The transplant was a success, and the girl grew up and is studying medicine. Story 40. I've said it on here before, but it still disturbs me to think about. Moray eels have a second set of jaws and teeth inside their throat. They latch on to prey with their primary jaws, and then the second set can move forward and either latch on and pull the prey down their throat, or eat away at larger prey without having to let go. Creepy as fuck.